A young woman working as a hotel maid dozed off in the bed of a wealthy guest, never expecting this simple mistake would capture his attention. The Wolf Grand Hotel was a realm where luxury, influence, and affluence blended effortlessly. Its marble corridors were frequented by business leaders, international officials, and celebrities, all engaged in conversations about multi-million-dollar deals. Golden chandeliers cast a soft, inviting light, while the subtle aroma of costly cologne lingered. For Evelyn Carter, though, this world was not about comfort, it was about survival. She had spent 10 hours tidying rooms, scrubbing bathrooms, changing linens, and making sure the elite never saw a trace of dust. Her feet throbbed, her hands were worn from cleaning agents, and fatigue weighed on her heavily. But stopping was not an option. She had to keep working. Her younger brother Liam relied on his medication, and rent was overdue. Life didn't pause for exhausted hotel workers. When Evelyn entered Suite 1903, she expected just another quick cleaning before heading home. The penthouse's panoramic windows showcased a stunning view of the city. At the center stood a vast king-size bed, dressed in the most luxurious sheets she had ever felt. Overcome by exhaustion, she convinced herself to rest for just a moment. That moment stretched into minutes, and she drifted into sleep. The sudden slam of a door startled her awake, her heart racing. She opened her eyes to see a man at the foot of the bed, staring at her as if she had committed a crime. He was tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in black, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. Alexander Wolf, the hotel's owner. He was the boss of all bosses. Panic surged through Evelyn as she realized her predicament. She scrambled upright, clutching the sheets for protection. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice cold and intimidating. Evelyn's breath caught as she tried to explain. His gaze grew sharper. "And why are you sleeping in my bed?" She leapt up, nearly falling. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. I was just—" Words failed her as exhaustion clouded her mind. Alexander waited, arms crossed, growing impatient. "I'm just a maid, sir. I was cleaning and must have sat down for a second. I didn't mean to fall asleep. I promise." His jaw clenched. "So, you thought my bed was your break room?" "No, never." Evelyn shook her head, desperate. "It was a mistake. I was just so tired. It won't happen again." Silence fell. Alexander should have been furious. Anyone else would have fired her instantly. He never tolerated errors. Yet, instead of anger, he felt something unexpected, a strange pull. He quickly dismissed the feeling, stepped closer, and towered over her. Evelyn froze, heart pounding. He studied her for a long moment, unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he simply exhaled and turned away. "Get out." Evelyn's breath caught. "Wait, what?" "I said get out," he repeated, curt but not unkind, uncertain if she had avoided disaster or if worse was coming. Evelyn hurriedly grabbed her cart, apologized again, and rushed out. Once alone, Alexander let out a slow breath, rubbing his temples. What had just happened? For the rest of the night, he couldn't concentrate on meetings or calls. His thoughts kept returning to the maid Evelyn. She was nothing like the women he usually met, those polished, sophisticated socialites who sought his attention at charity galas. Evelyn was different, genuine, unrefined, and honest in a way that intrigued him. He couldn't stop picturing her curled up in his bed, small and vulnerable, as if she belonged there. That thought should have annoyed him, but instead, it stirred something deeper. Alexander Wolf never allowed distractions. Yet, Evelyn Carter was a distraction he couldn't ignore. He had no reason to remember a maid he'd met countless people. Business partners, rivals, models, heiresses. Women who wore diamonds like a second skin and smiled with hunger for power, not love. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn Carter. It was absurd, irrational, but the memory of her sleeping in his bed lingered. She was just a maid, a stranger, yet something about her unsettled him like no one else ever had. The next day, Alexander walked through the VIP corridor, discussing business on the phone, trying to forget the previous night's incident until he saw her. Evelyn was near a luxury suite, adjusting linens on her cart, unaware of his presence as she focused on straightening towels. She looked different in daylight, more guarded, moving quickly, shoulders tense, as if hoping to avoid attention. especially his. Alexander paused, irritation rising at the thought she might be avoiding him. Without thinking, he approached her. Evelyn sensed his presence before she saw him. When she turned, a chill ran through her. Alexander Wolf stood before her, arms crossed, blue eyes studying her like a riddle. Evelyn straightened, gripping her cart. "You're avoiding me," he stated. Evelyn flushed. "No, sir. I'm just working." "How long have you worked here?" he asked. She hesitated. "Almost 2 years." He seemed surprised. "And I've never seen you before." She forced a smile. "That's probably a good thing. It means I'm doing my job right." Alexander narrowed his eyes, as if searching for truth behind her words. Alexander couldn't quite explain why he felt compelled to keep pursuing the conversation. But there was something about Evelyn that he found impossible to ignore. Most people, when confronted with his presence, try to win his favor either by flattering him or by shrinking away in fear. But Evelyn, she simply tried to stay out of his way. And, to his own annoyance, that only made him more curious. "Why are you always so guarded?" he asked. Evelyn hesitated. "I just don't want to cause any problems." Alexander regarded her quietly, and before he could stop himself, he said, "Tell me about yourself." Evelyn blinked, confused. "What?" "I want to know more about you," he insisted. She looked at him as if he'd started speaking in riddles. "Why?" "Because I want to," he replied. Evelyn shook her head, her hands tightening on the cart. "With all due respect, Mr. Wolf, I doubt my life would interest you." Alexander's eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to being dismissed. Yet that's exactly what she'd done. And now, more than ever, he wanted to learn more. That evening, Alexander did something he never did. He looked into her background. It wasn't about suspicion. He didn't even know why he cared. He just needed to understand. What he discovered surprised him. Evelyn Carter, 24, orphaned, caring for a younger brother named Liam who was ill. She juggled 2 jobs to pay for his treatments, barely scraping by, with no luxuries in her life. And yet, she never complained, never asked for favors, never tried to take advantage of him like so many others had. Sitting in his office, Alexander stared at her file, and for the first time in ages, he felt something unfamiliar, admiration for a woman who had nothing, yet carried herself with more dignity and strength than anyone he'd ever met. Suddenly, Evelyn Carter was no longer just another employee. She was someone he couldn't ignore. Alexander Wolf had always prided himself on his self-control. He commanded markets, managed empires, and kept his emotions in check. But with Evelyn Carter, all that control was slipping away. She hadn't sought his attention. She went out of her way to avoid him. Yet, he couldn't get her out of his thoughts. It made no sense. She was just a maid. Still, he wanted to know her. Alexander had never been the type to chase after anyone. If he desired something, it usually came to him. But with Evelyn, things were different. She kept her distance, so he made sure she couldn't. The following week, he specifically requested that Evelyn be assigned to clean his suite. Such a request was unheard of. Hotel owners didn't choose their maids. But Alexander wasn't like other men. When Evelyn entered his suite the next morning and saw him sitting there, sipping coffee, she stopped in her tracks. Her eyes widened. "You," she said. Alexander grinned over his coffee. "Good morning to you too, Miss Carter." Evelyn stiffened and immediately turned to leave. "I'll ask to be reassigned." Alexander's amusement grew. "You'd rather clean someone else's room than mine?" "Yes." He chuckled. "Too late. You're already assigned here." Evelyn let out a frustrated sigh. "Why are you doing this?" Alexander tilted his head. "Doing what?" "This." She gestured between them. "Whatever game you're playing." His expression turned serious. "It's not a game, Evelyn." She stared at him, lips pressed together, then silently moved past him to start her work. Alexander watched her, a small smile on his lips. A week later, fate intervened. After a grueling double shift, Evelyn finally left the hotel to head home. It was pouring rain. She had no umbrella, no coat, and no money for a taxi. So she walked. The cold seeped through her soaked uniform, making every step heavier. Suddenly, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down to reveal Alexander Wolf. He frowned as he saw her drenched and shivering. "Get in." Evelyn stopped. "What?" "Get in," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Evelyn hesitated. "I don't need dash," Alexander sighed, got out of the car, and draped his coat over her shoulders. Evelyn tensed. The coat was warm, expensive, and carried a scent, a mix of cedar and something powerful. She clutched it tightly, her breath uneven. "You'll get sick," Alexander said, his voice gentler now. Evelyn looked up at him, and for the first time, she saw something different in his eyes. Something genuine, something dangerous. She quickly looked away. "Thank you." Then, before she could say more, she turned and ran. Evelyn had always found solace in painting. It was her escape when life felt overwhelming. She would pick up a brush and let the colors speak for her. One night, after a long shift, she painted the sky in her tiny apartment. Vast, open, free a sky unlike the one she lived under. The next morning, she accidentally left her sketchbook open in the staff lounge, where Alexander found it. He had been looking for her, but when he saw her artwork, he stopped and stared. Something inside him shifted. This woman, who scrubbed floors and changed sheets, had a spirit far greater than the life she led. When Evelyn walked in and saw him holding her sketchbook, her heart nearly stopped. "Why do you have that?" she demanded, her voice tight. Alexander looked at her, then at the painting. "This is yours." Evelyn snatched the sketchbook from his hands, hugging it to her chest. "It's nothing." Alexander's lips pressed into a firm line. "It's not nothing." Evelyn kept her eyes down, refusing to meet his gaze. "I don't have time for dreams, Mr. Wolf." Alexander felt a tightness in his chest. He had spent his life surrounded by people who had everything, and yet here was Evelyn with so little, too afraid to even hope for more. He didn't know why, but in that moment, he wanted to give her the whole world. That evening, Alexander found her again, and this time he didn't let her slip away. "Have dinner with me." Evelyn stopped in her tracks. "What?" His eyes were unwavering. "Dinner. With me. Tonight." Evelyn blinked, struggling to process what he was asking. "No." Alexander's eyebrows rose. "No." She shook her head. "Thank you, but I know what this looks like." His jaw tightened. "And what does it look like?" "Like you're feeling sorry for me." Alexander's chest ached. "Evelyn Dash. I'm a maid, Mr. Wolf." She lifted her chin, even though her eyes were sad. "We live in different worlds." Alexander's breath caught. Suddenly, he stepped closer, his voice softer but firm. "I don't care about any of that, Evelyn. I care about you." Evelyn went still. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. For the first time in his life, Alexander Wolf felt what it meant to be rejected. But instead of discouraging him, it only made him want her more. Evelyn Carter had spent her life learning not to want. Wanting led to disappointment. Dreaming led to heartbreak. She'd always reminded herself that people like Alexander Wolf belonged to a world she could never enter. But now he was everywhere. He wasn't just a distant billionaire in a suit. He was the man who noticed when she was tired and made sure she wasn't overworked. The man who anonymously stocked the staff lounge with art supplies, never admitting it was for her. The man who, against all logic, looked at her like she was the most important thing in the world. And the hardest part? Evelyn wanted to believe him. Alexander Wolf had never thought of himself as a good man. He was ruthless in business, always calculating. He didn't waste time on things that didn't matter. But Evelyn Carter made him question everything. She had turned him down. She had walked away. And instead of moving on, he found himself wanting to change, wanting to be someone she wouldn't run from. He stopped barking orders. He listened more. He caught himself drifting off in meetings, his mind always returning to her. It was maddening. It was uncontrollable. And for once, he didn't want control. One evening after Evelyn's shift, she found Alexander waiting outside, leaning against his car, arms crossed, looking so effortlessly powerful that she couldn't breathe. "I'll walk you home," he said, as if it was already decided. Evelyn hesitated. You don't have to. I know. There was something in his tone that left no room for argument. So she let him. They walked through the quiet streets, the night air cool and clear. For a while, neither spoke. Then Alexander finally asked, Why are you so afraid of me? Evelyn slowed her steps. I'm not afraid of you. He gave her a look. She sighed, hugging herself. I'm afraid of this. Alexander's jaw tightened. Explain. Evelyn hesitated, then whispered, Because people like you don't choose people like me. Alexander stopped walking. What? She swallowed. Even if you think you do now, eventually you won't. And I can't let myself get used to something that isn't real. Something inside Alexander twisted painfully. He'd never met anyone who saw herself as so small, so unworthy, when to him, she was the only real thing in his world. Who made you believe that? His voice was sharp, almost angry. Evelyn looked away. Life did. Alexander stepped closer. Then let me prove life wrong. Evelyn's breath caught. He reached up, gently tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was tender, so unlike anything she'd expected from him. Their faces were close, their breaths mingling. Evelyn's heart pounded as his lips hovered near hers. For a moment, she almost let herself believe. But at the last second, fear won. She turned away. I can't. Alexander's hand dropped to his side. Silence stretched between them. Finally, he exhaled. I would never hurt you, Evelyn. Her voice trembled. You can't promise that. She turned and walked away, her steps unsteady. Alexander stood there, unmoving, fists clenched. For the first time in his life, he was afraid too. The grand ballroom of the Wolf Grand Hotel gleamed with golden light, chandeliers sparkling above New York's elite. Guests arrived in tailored suits and designer gowns, laughter and conversation, swirling with power and influence. It was a world built on appearances, and tonight, Alexander Wolf was expected to play his part. But his mind was elsewhere on a woman who didn't belong in this world, who was probably home, exhausted after another long shift. Evelyn. He hated how much he needed to see her. Before he could get lost in his own thoughts, a voice cut through the noise. Alexander. He turned to find Sophia Loren standing there, the daughter of a powerful real estate tycoon, a woman who had spent years trying to win his attention, despite his lack of interest. Tonight, she was wrapped in silk and diamonds, her eyes shining with the same self-assurance she always wore. You seem tense, she said smoothly. Let me guess. You'd rather be anywhere else. Alexander let out a sigh. Something like that. Sophia stepped closer, a sly smile on her lips. I suppose it has something to do with that hotel maid. Alexander's expression hardened immediately. What do you know about Evelyn? Sophia's smirk grew. Apparently more than you do. Sophia had always been calculating. She recognized when Alexander cared about someone, and she knew exactly how to hurt them. So she devised a plan. The next day, she arranged a private meeting with Evelyn. She entered the staff lounge with an air of superiority, catching Evelyn off guard. Sophia gave her a slow, critical once-over before speaking. We need to talk. Evelyn hesitated. About what? Sophia's smile was cold as she pulled out her checkbook, scribbled a large number, and tore out the check. She held out to Evelyn. Take this. Evelyn stared in disbelief. Excuse me? Take the money and walk away, Sophia said, her tone even. Alexander isn't for you. You know that as well as I do. Evelyn's hands balled into fists. I don't want your money. Sophia arched an eyebrow. Are you sure? Because let's be honest, you were never going to last. He'll lose interest. He always does. Evelyn felt a painful twist in her stomach. Leave him before he leaves you. Just as Evelyn found her voice, ready to throw the check back, a sharp voice interrupted. What's going on here? Evelyn's heart stopped. She turned to see Alexander standing in the doorway, his expression icy, betrayed, and furious. In that instant, Evelyn realized what it must have looked like. Her with a blank check in hand, Sophia watching with satisfaction. Evelyn dropped the check as if it burned. Alexander, it's not dash. But his voice was cold and cutting. I trusted you. Evelyn's breath caught. I thought you were different, he said, voice eerily calm. But I guess I was wrong. Her chest tightened. I didn't take it. But you considered it. He sighed. Evelyn's voice shook. No, I just Stop. His tone was glacial. I should have known better. Evelyn's vision blurred. Please, just let me explain. There's nothing to explain. She felt like the air had been knocked from her lungs. Then he turned and walked away. He didn't look back. In that moment, she lost him. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. She didn't eat. Didn't do anything except replay the moment over and over, trying to understand how everything had unraveled so quickly. By morning, she had made her decision. She packed her things. She quit her job. And as she left the Wolf Grand Hotel for the last time, she told herself she wouldn't cry. She failed. Alexander Wolf had always been skilled at shutting people out. That was how he survived, how he built his empire. So why couldn't he stop thinking about Evelyn Carter? He tried, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. When he returned to his suite that evening, expecting nothing but emptiness, his eyes landed on something unexpected, a painting. One she must have left behind, the one of the skies she dreamed of. In that instant, everything fell apart. By the time Alexander's anger faded, it was too late. Evelyn was gone. For the first time in his life, Alexander Wolf realized he had lost the only thing that ever truly mattered. He had everything: wealth, power, influence. Yet his world had never felt so empty since Evelyn left. The hotel was just walls and silence. Every morning, he woke up hoping to see her in his suite, only to face the cruel reality that she was gone. He had let her go, and it was his fault. For days, Alexander threw himself into work, trying to ignore the ache in his chest. But then Oliver, his assistant, burst into his office, breathless and urgent. Sir, you need to see this. Alexander barely glanced up. Not now, Oliver. But Oliver insisted, slamming a file onto the desk. Alexander frowned, opened it, and the moment he saw what was inside, his blood ran cold. A recording, a conversation. Sophia's voice, dripping with manipulation. Give her the check. Make sure Alexander sees it. Evelyn's voice, full of anger. I don't want him money. And then, the exact moment Alexander had walked and played on the recording the setup, the deception Sophia had planned. Everything was clear now. Evelyn had been honest all along. She had never betrayed him. Alexander jumped to his feet, his chair crashing to the floor. Where is she? He demanded, his voice urgent. Oliver hesitated. She left the hotel. I think she's planning to leave the city. A heavy silence hung in the air. Without another word, Alexander grabbed his coat and dashed out. Rain hammered the streets as Alexander's car raced through the city. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his thoughts a whirlwind. He had to find her. He had to make things right. By the time he reached her apartment, he was drenched to the bone, but he didn't care. He pounded on her door. No answer. Evelyn. His voice was rough with emotion. Please, open the door. Still nothing. Panic clawed at him. What if he was too late? What if she was already gone? Desperate, he leaned his forehead against the door, his voice breaking. I was wrong, he whispered. I should have believed you. I should have fought for you. A pause. Then, softly, the lock turned and the door opened. Evelyn stood there, eyes wide, her face unreadable. Her suitcase was by the couch she had been about to leave. Alexander's heart ached. Evelyn, he breathed. She swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you doing here? I was a fool, he said, stepping forward, his eyes pleading. I let my past cloud my judgment. I let my fears ruin the best thing that ever happened to me. Evelyn's lip trembled. You hurt me, Alexander. He nodded, pain etched across his face. I know, and I'm sorry. I don't care about what you have or don't have, or where you come from. I only care about you. His voice cracked. I only care about having you in my life. A single tear slid down Evelyn's cheek. Alexander hesitated, then took a shaky breath. I love you, he whispered. The words hit Evelyn like a wave. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she threw herself into his arms. Alexander held her tightly, and finally, he kissed her. It wasn't careful or tentative. It was everything, every longing, every regret, every promise, all in one kiss. Evelyn's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, as if she'd waited her whole life for this. In that moment, Alexander knew he would never let her go again. When they finally parted, Evelyn laughed softly through her tears. Alexander brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. "Come back with me." She blinked. "To the hotel?" He shook his head. "To me?" Evelyn's heart thundered. Alexander took her hands, his gaze steady and full of meaning. "I don't want you as an employee, Evelyn," he said. "I want you as the woman I love." A long pause. Then, slowly, Evelyn smiled. "Okay." And just like that, everything fell into place. Months later, Evelyn Carter stood on the rooftop of the Wolf Grand Hotel, gazing out at the city skyline. She had her own art studio now, her own gallery, thanks Alexander, not out of pity, but out of love. And Alexander stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching her with that rare, gentle smile he saved only for her. "You got your sky," he murmured, glancing at her paintings. Evelyn turned to him, her heart full. "And you got your heart back." Alexander chuckled quietly. "I think you stole it, actually." She grinned. "I'll take good care of it." As the city lights sparkled below, they stood in the place where they first met. Alexander leaned in and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her lips. This time, there was no fear, no hesitation. Only love. Love has a way of finding us when we least expect it. Evelyn never imagined she belonged in Alexander's world, and Alexander never thought he could love. But sometimes the right person doesn't just change your life, they show you who you're meant to be. Evelyn was never just a maid. She was a woman who taught a billionaire that love is worth the risk. And Alexander wasn't just a ruthless CEO. He was a man who proved to Evelyn that she was never too small to dream. Because true love isn't about status, wealth, or power. It's about finding someone who sees your worth even when you can't.